Hi, my name is Rachel and you're watching the Rachelistic channel. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, then welcome to my channel. So today's video is all about autistic burnout. The last video I posted was also about autistic burnout, but that was more about my personal experience with autistic burnout. If you haven't seen it, then I'll have it linked in this video and in the description so you can check it out if you're interested in watching it. This video, however, is more of an educational video about autistic burnout. After experiencing it for myself and in the process of recovering from it, I wanted to learn more about what exactly autistic burnout is and the things that you can do to recover from it or prevent it. And of course, I wanted to share everything that I learned with you guys. So let's go ahead and learn more about autistic burnout. So as always, let's start with a definition. In the 2020 study called "Having All of Your Internal Resources Exhausted Beyond Measure and Being Left with No Cleanup Crew, Defining Autistic Burnout," Dr. Raymaker, a leading researcher in autistic burnout, and her colleagues defined it as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without adequate supports. It is characterized by pervasive, long-term, typically 3+ months, exhaustion, loss of function, and reduced tolerance to stimulus. So to put that in a way that's easier to understand, autistic burnout is a state of intense exhaustion that typically lasts at least 3 months, and it includes a loss of abilities and reduced tolerance to sensory input. So yeah, it looks like being tired, like really tired all the time, not being able to do the things that you once were able to do, and having more sensory issues. And so autistic burnout typically happens because of chronic life stress, unrealistic or unattainable expectations, or a lack of support. And so, so that's basically what autistic burnout is. If you were just looking for a simple definition, then I suppose you could just leave the video now. But if you want even more information than that, I suggest that you stick around and keep watching. Awesome. So at this point, you might be wondering, what is the difference between autistic burnout and regular burnout or occupational burnout? We're going to cover that now. So what you would typically call burnout or occupational burnout is mainly about stress and exhaustion caused by a person's job. So the 3 main points of burnout are increased feelings of exhaustion and energy depletion, increased negative feelings towards your job, or increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. And that is basically like having a lowered belief or less belief, I guess, in the ability to do your job effectively. It's like you feel less able to do your job, I guess. You feel like you don't have the abilities to do your job as much as you would have before. So yeah, those are the 3 main points of burnout. So for autistic burnout, on the other hand, the 3 main points are pervasive exhaustion that lasts at least 3 months, like we covered in the definition, a loss of skills, and a reduced tolerance to sensory stimuli. So as you can see, occupational burnout and autistic burnout are very different. They both have exhaustion in common, but other than that, they're 2 different things. Some other differences between occupational burnout and autistic burnout are the causes of the burnout. So for occupational burnout, the causes would be not being able to adequately manage work stress or not having effective like coping skills for work stress. Whereas for autistic burnout, the causes for that is a combined load of life stress without adequate supports, which we'll get more into the causes later on in this video. Other differences between occupational burnout and autistic burnout is the treatment, or like, yeah, I guess treatment or how to recover from it. So for occupational burnout, to recover from that, it would be to stop overworking and to learn how to manage your energy better. So like having a better work-life balance. Whereas for autistic burnout, the treatment would be to like stop masking, getting accommodations, and reducing sensory stimuli. But of course, we're going to get more into that later in the video as well. So stay tuned. So in summary, occupational burnout is related to one's job, while autistic burnout is related to all the areas of one's life. So yeah, those are kind of the main differences between burnout, occupational burnout, and autistic burnout. Now let's get into the signs and symptoms of autistic burnout. So there are 6 categories of symptoms that we'll go through today. The categories are physical, cognitive, executive functioning, social, emotional, and sensory. So we're going to start off with the physical symptoms of autistic burnout. So some physical symptoms of autistic burnout are chronic fatigue, feeling exhausted and depleted. Like that fatigue and exhaustion is not better explained by sickness, malnutrition, or from exercising. So like you're exhausted, but like not for any of those reasons, but like just from life, I guess. Yeah, another symptom is difficulty getting out of bed, where it feels like impossible to get out of bed, and in the increased need to sleep or having difficulty sleeping. So some cognitive symptoms are being like mentally exhausted and like being unable to think clearly. Like kind of just like your mind is all like jumbled up. You can't think clearly. I can't talk clearly right now. Another symptom is like losing the ability to process information that you usually would have been able to process. It usually would like you would have been fine with, but now it's like feels more difficult, or like it takes longer for you to like process certain information. Another one is thinking, like your thinking is just slower, and it takes more effort to like think about things, or like to like think through things. Like it just takes you longer and it's just slower, it just takes more effort. Another one is struggling to focus and concentrate for more than a few minutes. So if typically you're able to like focus on things for, you know, a decent amount of time, and now it's like you can't focus on anything for more than a few minutes, that would be a symptom. That was a symptom that I definitely had. Another symptom is finding it harder to solve problems and finding it harder to find the right words to say, or find the right words that you want to say to like explain something. Like it's just like you can't find the words that typically you would have been able to. And our last cognitive symptom is finding it harder to remember facts, skills, or words. I guess I already said that, but yeah, it's just like harder to like remember things. So the next category is executive functioning symptoms. And so the loss of executive functioning skills or abilities is oftentimes the first sign of autistic burnout to appear. If there's one thing that you want to, I guess, look out for, if you want to like look out for autistic burnout, it would be like the loss of executive functioning abilities, because that's oftentimes the first sign. And it's also often shows up with the loss of interest in other things, like your special interests, for example, or hobbies, or just things that you typically would like. You might just start losing interest in that, and that can be a sign of autistic burnout. So keep that in mind. Some executive functioning symptoms is like finding it harder to plan things. So you might feel like too overwhelmed, or it might like seem too overwhelming to plan things, or you just like don't know where to start when it comes to planning things anymore. You might struggle more than usual with unexpected changes and routines. Obviously, if you're autistic, sudden changes are not fun, but it might seem even more like overwhelming or even more like stressful when a certain change happens, more than it would have been before. Yeah, it might find it more difficult to stick to routines and to transition to different tasks. It might be more difficult to make decisions, and so you might find yourself avoiding making decisions more, or like procrastinating when you have to make a decision. So next is the social symptoms. So that can look like social interactions feeling more difficult than usual. So you might feel more discomfort during like social interactions. It just might feel like more awkward, or like just more uncomfortable to be in social situations than it was before. And you might just find yourself like avoiding social interactions altogether because it's just like more uncomfortable or difficult than it was before. You might find talking to people or calling people or texting them is just too much effort. Like, yeah, it just feels like too much effort. You might feel unable to attend events or gatherings that you usually would have been able to like manage and go to. I feel like that was something that I had experienced. It's like, I don't know, usually if you felt like you could go and like hang out with friends like after doing something else in the day, but then now it's like you're just so exhausted from the one thing that you did. It's like, ugh, I cannot manage going out with friends right now. So yeah. Another one is it might take longer than usual to think of responses to things in conversations. Like you find yourself often just not really knowing what to say next because you just can't think of anything to say next. Yeah, and eye contact might be more stressful, just more uncomfortable than it was before. And the last example of a social symptom is losing the ability to mask. So you might find it more difficult to mask, or just more draining, and it's just like you don't feel like you have the energy to mask really anymore. So the next category is emotional symptoms. And so some emotional symptoms are feeling more emotional than usual. So you might notice that you are more prone to having like outbursts of sadness or outbursts of anger. It's like you're just emotional, like little things kind of make you more angry, or like more sad or overwhelmed, or whatever emotion, more than, you normally would. Yeah, you might find that you're unable to manage your emotions how you usually would. Like it's just more difficult. You might feel overwhelmed, or just feel kind of like down, or just like bad or something. Like if you are a person that struggles with identifying their emotions, then you may not know exactly what you're feeling, but you just kind of feel like down, or just like some sort of vaguely negative emotion quite frequently. You might be feeling like that more than you normally would. You might experience more meltdowns and shutdowns, and they may be more intense and take longer to recover from. And then finally, you might feel more anxious than usual. So, yeah, you're just feeling more anxious than you typically were feeling in the past, or feeling more anxious about more things than you were before. And so the last category of symptoms is sensory symptoms. And so some of these are your hypersensitivities are worse than before. So if you were already sensitive to something, like sound, for example, then you would feel even more sensitive to it now, like it's worse. And you may even become sensitive to things that you weren't sensitive to before, you didn't really notice before. So for example, you might start to become bothered by the sound of people chewing if that wasn't something that bothered you before. Or you might be bothered by the smell of certain products that you have, or like the sound of like a fan or the air conditioning or heating or whatever, something in your house that runs all the time that might have not bothered you before, but now it's starting to bother you now. You may feel an increased need to stim, like you may feel like you need to stim more than you usually did, and you might feel like you're less able to mask that. And finally, you might rely more on safe foods or the same foods more than you did before. So you're eating like the same things every day, or like a small rotation of certain foods all the time. So those are some signs and symptoms of autistic burnout. Of course, it's not an exhaustive list. There are some things that I talked about, some examples I gave that you probably won't or don't experience. And then there are things that I didn't mention that you do experience or might experience that are signs of autistic burnout. The examples I gave is just to kind of give an idea of what it can look like and things to look out for when looking for autistic burnout. While I was researching for this video, I came across a list of questions actually that you can ask yourself if you think that you might be experiencing autistic burnout. So these questions came from aidcanada.ca. And I think that they're a great resource for helping to recognize autistic burnout in yourself. So these are the questions. So 1, do any of the possible reasons for autistic burnout described above sound familiar? Do you think any of these are happening for you right now? 2, are you noticing any increases in traits commonly associated with autism? For instance, are you doing more repetitive or self-soothing behaviors than is typical, like rocking back and forth? 3, are you experiencing increased sensitivity to things in your sensory environment? 4, do you feel tired most of the time? 5, are you having trouble focusing on tasks at work or in school? 6, have you felt a loss in self-esteem? Do you feel like you are not good enough? 7, are you experiencing a loss of executive functioning skills, like ability to plan, set goals, organize, etc.? 8, are you shutting down and isolating yourself from others? 9, have you lost interest in activities that used to bring you joy or were soothing? And 10, have you lost abilities that you once had, like loss of speech, for example? If you want to check out the questions for yourself or the website for yourself, then I will have it linked in the description below so you can go ahead and check it out for yourself. So now that we know what autistic burnout can look like, you might be thinking that it kind of sounds like depression. So while they do have their similarities, autistic burnout and depression are two separate things, and we'll go over those differences now. So depression is a mood disorder that causes feelings of sadness and a loss of interest, so much so that it interferes with daily functioning. So someone who's depressed may feel stuck in their sadness and may feel numb, and they typically lose interest in their hobbies and things that they like doing. As we know, someone who is experiencing autistic burnout, they feel exhausted, they are affected more by sensory stimuli, and they lose the ability to do things that they once were able to do. So the main difference between autistic burnout and depression is that depression is it's more about a persistent feeling of sadness and a loss of interest, while autistic burnout is more about pervasive exhaustion and a loss of abilities. So as I was doing my research about the difference between autistic burnout and depression, I came across a website called neurodivergentinsights.com, and they had a very helpful graphic that further shows the differences between autistic burnout and depression, and it also shows the similarities as well. So I will put it up on the screen now. So as you can see, some of the major differences between depression and autistic burnout is that with depression, they typically respond well to structured and engaging activities, so behavioral activation, while for autistic burnout, excessive activity and behavioral activation may exacerbate burnout, so it will make the burnout worse. When with depression, we have more feelings of like inadequacy or like worthlessness. You know, you have a lot of negative thoughts about yourself or the world or the future, and like just a persistent depressed mood. Whereas with autistic burnout, it's not really about like your feelings, but it's more like about you have more sensitivities to stimuli, so you're less able to deal with your sensory sensitivities, or you lose the ability to mask, so you have another loss of an ability, and more loss of skills and like executive function and communication and life skills. So, and some of the ways that depression and autistic burnout overlap is with food and appetite changes. You might be more withdrawn socially and like avoid social situations. Concentration difficulties, executive functioning difficulties is actually something that is common between the two. And of course, fatigue and just, feeling really tired. So I'll have a link to this website in the description as well, so you can check it out for yourself and look more into it and read the article that goes with this picture as well if you want to. But that's basically it for the difference between autistic burnout and depression. So now let's talk about what causes autistic burnout in the first place. So there are lots of reasons why autistic burnout might happen. One of the most common reason is masking. Excessive masking or camouflaging is one of the most cited reasons for autistic burnout. It was my main reason for autistic burnout. So masking takes a lot of effort to do, and when you do it excessively, the load of it adds up, and that is what really causes autistic burnout. Another reason for autistic burnout is from sensory processing differences. Major or unexpected stress or change in routines can make it more difficult to deal with or to cope with sensory overload. And if you're in an environment or a situation that is very stressful and very overwhelming, like sensory wise, then it would be more difficult to deal with those sensory issues. If you're in that situation or environment for a long time, then it will definitely add to autistic burnout, because you're just constantly being overwhelmed with sensory input. Difficulty sleeping is another reason that can cause autistic burnout. Many autistic people actually struggle with sleep, something that I learned while doing research for this video. Some reasons for this are anxiety, stress, or a dysregulated circadian rhythm. If you don't know what that is, it's the body's natural like sleep wake cycle that it goes through on its own. So if you're not getting enough sleep consistently for a long amount of time, then that can contribute to autistic burnout for sure. The next reason is medical or physical concerns. So sometimes the onset of a physical health issue, like an injury from an accident or a medical illness, can cause autistic burnout. Also, major hormonal changes like puberty or menopause or even possibly pregnancy can also be a reason for autistic burnout. Your hormones are doing a lot, so it can definitely cause you to burn out for sure. Trying to keep up with demands for social interactions is another reason for autistic burnout. Interacting with others is another thing that requires a lot of energy from autistic people. It takes a longer time to recharge from these interactions than it would for a non-autistic person to recharge from social interaction. And so if you continuously don't get enough time to recharge before your next social interaction, it will definitely lead to autistic burnout because it will just pile up and you'll just be like more and more exhausted. So yeah. And I can say that that was also another one of my reasons for autistic burnout, is that I just was not giving myself enough time to recover from social interactions and things like that. This next reason is kind of similar to the last one, and it's unrealistic expectations. So many autistic people who have gone through autistic burnout have felt overwhelmed from trying to keep up with expectations from themselves and from others. Most of the time, these expectations are unrealistic for the autistic person, and it only makes them feel like they're falling behind or are just lesser than like other people. When they consistently can't meet these expectations, it leads to feelings of hopelessness and can also lead to autistic burnout as well, which is another reason for autistic burnout that I can relate to for sure. Another reason for autistic burnout is because of a lack of support or recognition. So if you don't feel supported by your friends or your family or your work or school or by your healthcare workers, it's difficult to feel safe enough to share your feelings or your struggles. If people often dismiss or deny you support or recognition, you will most likely keep your struggles to yourself, and that can lead to autistic burnout as well, because you're just holding everything in because you don't have anyone to talk to. And similarly, a lack of accommodations is another reason for autistic burnout. If you're not getting the supports or help that you need, it will be more likely for you to become overwhelmed. And if this happens consistently, then it will also lead to autistic burnout again. And so finally, the last reason for autistic burnout is unexpected or major life changes. So autistic people already have a hard time dealing with change. So when a major or an unexpected life change happens, it can be very difficult to deal with. If you don't have the support to deal with the change, but you still have to, tend to your regular day-to-day tasks, it can easily become very overwhelming because you're trying to do everything while dealing with a major life change. And so, that can definitely lead to autistic burnout as well. And so those are some of the reasons why autistic burnout happens. One of the things that all of these reasons have in common is that they all have to happen for a prolonged amount of time or cause like significant overwhelm to lead to autistic burnout. So, autistic burnout doesn't happen just because of like one thing. Of course, if it's like a major life change or major life situation or something, of course that can cause autistic burnout. But for a lot of these things, it's the buildup of something that has been happening for a long time that causes autistic burnout. So now that we know what autistic burnout is, what it looks like, and why it happens, I'm sure you're wondering what can be done to prevent or recover from it. Well, you're in luck because that's what we're going to cover now. How to recover from or prevent autistic burnout. So the first thing that you can do to recover or prevent autistic burnout is to reduce your load and make time to rest. I mentioned this in my last video that rest is super important for recovering from autistic burnout. So making sure that your load is manageable and taking time to rest and recuperate from stress and energy demanding tasks is important for preventing burnout and will help in recovering from autistic burnout as well. Some ways that you can reduce your load and take time to rest are taking time off work and taking advantage of, your sick days or your vacation days if that's possible for you to do. Taking more breaks while you're doing tasks, reducing social activity, and taking time to fully recover from social activity, and reducing your stressful activities. The next thing that you can do to recover from or prevent autistic burnout is to attend to your autistic needs. So that means stimming when you need to and not repressing it, or spending time on your special interests to help you recharge or regain your energy. Attending to your artistic needs is basically just unmasking, honestly. It's not hiding your autistic self or trying to seem more neurotypical. It's just being your authentic autistic self. Unmasking takes a huge weight off of your shoulders and will definitely help in recovering from and preventing autistic burnout. The next tip is getting formal supports. So this would be things like receiving accommodations or getting mental health support. Most, if not all, places require a formal diagnosis to provide accommodations. That's just the reality of the world we live in. So if you are in school or you have a job and you feel like you would benefit from accommodations, then I would suggest seeking out a formal diagnosis if you don't already have one and if it's possible for you. Of course, the process of getting a diagnosis is long and expensive and not accessible for a lot of people. So if that's not a possibility for you, but you still need accommodations, I would suggest looking into ways to accommodate yourself or talking to your school or job or wherever you are about what they can do to help you without a diagnosis, or maybe if they can help you get a diagnosis. I don't know. But yes, try to find help, basically. Another formal support that you can look into is mental health support. You don't necessarily need a diagnosis to get mental health support, and some places actually offer like specialized mental health support for neurodivergent people, even if you don't have a diagnosis. It really depends on your area and, what's available. So I would suggest looking into that if that's something you're interested in. But either way, talking to a mental health professional can be very beneficial in recovering from and preventing autistic burnout. Another thing that can help is learning more about your autism. It's great to learn about autism in general, but if you don't know how that information relates to you or how it presents in your life, then it's not really helping you. Honestly, this is a tip that I need for myself. Yeah, I'm always learning new things about autism, but I don't always take the time to apply it to myself. It's important to understand your patterns of behavior and feelings so that you can recognize the early signs of autistic burnout in yourself and you can do the things to prevent it. Also, knowing more about yourself can help with recovery and finding systems that will work for you. The next tip is similar to the last, and it's learning to advocate for yourself and take care of your health. So it's important to learn to self-advocate so you can set healthy boundaries and expectations with people. If you're already drained from doing your work, it's helpful to know how to say no to people asking you to do more work. Self-advocacy also includes knowing when and how to ask for help. Nobody can do everything on their own, and being autistic means that you might need more help with things, and that's okay. It's also important to take care of your health and to make sure that you're taking care of your body. Having a body that feels good and is healthy will be one less stressor to deal with, which will help in preventing autistic burnout and also recovering from it. This next tip may seem kind of random, but it makes sense. So, having stable housing can help in preventing and recovering from autistic burnout. So, living in a space where you're comfortable and is predictable or consistent, I guess, will eliminate a lot of stress from your life and will provide you with a place where you can decompress peacefully. Of course, with the world that we live in, this isn't always possible for everyone. If you're one of those people where it's just not possible right now, I wish I had some tips to help you, but I'm going to be honest, I don't really have any tips. But I hope that you at least find a place or some type of space where you can feel comfortable and relax, and hopefully that you can, I don't know, in the future find some stable housing. So the last thing to help recover from and prevent autistic burnout is acceptance, awareness, and support. So spending time with people who are accepting of you, understanding of your autism, and supportive can help with preventing autistic burnout and also help with recovering from it. An important note is that autistic burnout has been seen to improve when people feel supported and are given the space and time to feel less overwhelmed. So if you're someone who knows someone who is going through autistic burnout, make sure to give them the time and the space to recover, and let them know that you are there for them. It will help a lot. So those are all of the tips to help with recovering from and preventing autistic burnout. I hope that some of them were helpful, and if you have any other tips that I didn't mention, then please go ahead and comment them down below. It'd be nice to see, what things have helped you, and maybe it'll help someone else. So that's everything for today's video. If you learned something new or found this was a useful video for you, then please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up so that it can spread to more people. And if you enjoy watching my videos, then please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so that you can know when I post my next video. So as always, stay ritualistic, or whatever your name is, istic, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye. Okay.